Hello, I'm Christine Tacon. I'm actually a chartered engineer who's spent most of their career in the food industry, whether that be at Mars Confectionery or running the co-op's farming business when it was the biggest farmer in the UK, and to then being a regulator of the supermarkets, making sure that they treat their suppliers fairly. And since I've stood down from doing that, I've had sort of more of a portfolio of roles. And I am chair of MDS, which is a graduate recruitment and training organisation for the food and fresh produce industry. So I'd love to tell you more about in a bit. And I'm also chair of Assured Food Standards, which trades as Red Tractor.
So, hi, I'm Nick Court. I am the CEO of the People Experience Hub. We are a employee engagement, employee experience company that helps lots of companies around the world understand how people feel at work, how they feel about working for an organization, what those organizations can do to improve the world of work for those people and get some real positive people outcomes. We have quite a few food clients that we work with, and we focus then on how does engagement and food technical standards come together.
We're here today to talk about employee engagement, food safety, company culture, world in food and agriculture. I wanted to start off with a question. How would you go about defining a food safety culture in the context of, I guess, the work you've done? And I think really with the lens of why is it important to think about food safety when in the food and beverage manufacturing industry?
Well, now I'm going to put very firmly my chair of Red Tractor hat on and just tell you a bit of history. Red Tractor was actually formed in 2000, and it was an initiative, funnily enough, driven by Tony Blair, who was Prime Minister at the time. And at the time, we were just coming through the end of BSE. We had salmonella as a major issue. And around that time, I think it was late 2000, early 2001, we had foot and mouth disease. So the confidence of the public in British food was absolutely rock bottom. Absolutely. I mean, that is food safety. If you want to say, why is food safety important? Just think back to that time. And the role of what Red Tractor was, there were assurance schemes in various parts of the industry. They were all different. And there was to pull them all together onto one logo. And the role of Red Tractor was to sit there as a consumer-facing brand to reassure people that the traceability of this piece of food has been done to a standard, which are all public. And it has become the de facto standard of what retailers ask for. So I think when you say, why is food safety important, you only have to look at when we got it completely wrong. Every now and then we get little scares. You get E. coli scares. I think it was a big bean sprout scare. It was not a Red Tractor thing, but, just saying when you get a food scare, it suddenly makes you realize how important it is as an area.
When we talk about food safety culture, Christine, in particular, we're thinking about the practices and behaviors that create an environment where food safety is paramount. Is that, Nick, how would you go about defining it actually before we kind of get into that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what a lot of what you're talking about there is about behavioral safety, and it's about setting an environment. Number one, it's about setting an environment where people are enabled. So the people are trained, people have the learning that they need to do, they have the tools that they need to do, so equipment is safe, that they're in an environment where they can safely raise concerns, that they can talk to people about, fears that they may have with no fear of consequence. And I think that's really important as well, because when you look at food safety as a behavioral culture piece, and we talk about people, and I'll talk about food manufacturing, that's kind of where my specialism sits. It's what we're talking about is once produce has got to a factory or a manufacturing site, then how do we ensure that quality of food continues, and it continues through, and it starts with the individual. It starts with that individual understanding their role and what they can and can't do, but it also is behavioural, and that behavioural piece is really key. And we know that there's a BRCGC food safety standard that's out there that has an assurance in food manufacturing. And I think when people start looking at those elements around Do people understand the purpose of the organization? Organizational commitment is being measured to both the standards of the food and also the standards of treating people. Trust in health and safety, trust in that stuff. What we see is that's where the really important stuff comes through. The challenge for many food manufacturers at the moment is retention. So various economic situations have led to a retention issue. And also then you get language barriers and physical barriers. So I think there's, an industry that is changing massively. So I would probably say food safety culture, to answer your question. Specifically, a food safety culture starts with understanding people and understanding behaviors. You agree?
Yeah, it's not just understanding, it's actually treating people properly in the first place. And if you treat your employees properly and treat them as if you value them and recognize how desperately important they are to your business and that they realize how important they are, then everything else probably just follows. But I think it's one of my little gripes about how some people communicate some of the red tractor standards to their employees is that they say, oh, we've got to do this because red tractor tell us to. And then privately, they'll say to me, I know that's the right thing to do. And I know it's what we should be doing. But it's easier to put the blame on Red Tractor than to say this is the right way of doing things. And I think, I think you really should have a relationship with your employees that you're saying to them, this is why it's important. We've got consumers, we've got retailers. How would you feel if, the standards that we are implementing are to make everybody feel better about the work that they do, and you should as well.
I get obsessed by the way we think about different things that are roughly the same and treat people differently. So we think about brewers. So we think about somebody who makes beer. They're craftspeople. They are passionate about their craft. They're passionate about the heritage of their craft, the best hops, the best malt, the best processes, and it doesn't matter. I mean, I've spent time in breweries in central London, in breweries in Derbyshire, in breweries in Cornwall. The passion is the same passion. And
this is all in the interest of work, is it, Nick?
Yes, I've spent a lot of time in breweries in the interest of understanding people better. But you think about bread makers, it's a craft. You think about anyone that takes ingredients and elements and turns it into something else, it's a craft. And I think somewhere down the line, we've convinced people it's a production line. And in many instances, by the way, it is a production line. But that pride, what we see is where people are proud of the brand, the company, the produce that they make, the outcome that they deliver, then I think you're absolutely right, Christine. Everything else comes with it. You treat people well and you give them that purpose and that pride in outcomes, and they're on the journey. They're there. Treat them like they're a craft. Treat them like they're producing something.
Christine, can I ask you a question? Employee engagement, even a term that comes up a lot, like in your world, is it something? I mean, if you think about like the span of your career, it's not a new concept, but is it something that has been discussed at a senior level in food and agriculture? Like even recently.
When I ran the Co-op farms, obviously the Co-op whole organisation ran employee engagement surveys, and guess which business came top of employee engagement across the whole of the Co-op? It was the farming business, but I don't know. I mean, I was dead proud of it, but I also loved those surveys because there's always something in there for you to look at and see where you can improve. And so I saw them as a challenge, and I was already going around every farm at harvest and sitting on the machines with them. I thought I'd be getting in their way, but they loved the fact that I actually understood the hours that they were working and the pressure of the role. And then every year I used to go around all of the farms individually, or maybe if there were 2 or 3 farms nearby, they came together and go through how we'd done the previous year, and what our plans were and where we were going forward. So actually saying, I know your job is to drive a tractor, but you need to know what this business is doing and where we're going. And here's our employee engagement survey. And here is the areas where we didn't do very well. And this is what I'm going to do about it. So employee engagement, I think we got it sort of almost by accident in Co-op farms because the Co-op was doing it. So we did it as well. And we also do it at MDS. But because our trainees are only ever with us for 2 years, we are continually doing reviews and feedback and getting feedback from them. So it's one of the reasons I think the program is so successful is because employees keep leaving and they complain about something. And you thought, we've only just put that right. But obviously we didn't put it right enough and we have another go at it. So we're getting all of that feedback and continually improving the program and handing a program to a new group of trainees that we think are going to find it perfect, and then they find fault with it. And so we then have another opportunity to improve. So I think employee engagement is horrendously powerful and employees will change. Who would have talked about mental health 5 years ago? You need to keep on top of employee engagement and keep asking and keep moving your business with the times. And, ideally, the retention issues that we had at the co-op were actually the other way around, is because people didn't leave in the farming business. And you think, well, where do you get your fresh ideas from if nobody ever moves?
I kind of follow it then. Why do you think it's not more widely adopted across food and agriculture? Because to your point, we know it's effective. There's loads of statistics and studies that say it works. Do you think it's not more widely adopted at the moment?
I think one of the problems with particularly the growing industry or the farming and growing industry is that the pressure on price is absolutely immense and it's always there. And I think the things that people then sort of, we don't have any money for investment. We don't have any money for training. We don't have any money for this. And it's almost like when you think you're cutting everything to the bone, that doesn't mean that you cut to the bone what you're doing with your people. Because what you're doing with your people actually pays dividends. But at the time when you're actually saying to everybody, we're not going to work tomorrow, we're all going to go and sit in a meeting room and discuss something, or you're all going to stop work and sit and, I told people that the employee engagement questionnaire should be filled in during work time. So they needed to be given, every farm needed to be given time during work time when they could fill it in. Because I think if you just sort of send them home with it or email it to them at home and say, do it in your own time, it wouldn't have got done. We actually also got the highest participation rate of the survey because we said, get people to sit down and fill it in because this is important. Because if I'm going to change the business, I want to know that I'm changing it in a way that's representative of everybody, not just the people who like filling in forms. I think the pressure on price has made people think, well, we haven't got time to do this, we can't afford to do that. And I think we need to rise above it and understand that some things, we all know, finding new people. If you're running your business low on people and you're continually recruiting and you're not, and people don't stay, it's an enormous impact on your time. It's much less impact to understand what the things are and if there are some simple things you can do to make people want to stay with you.
I think the thing that's really interesting for me when you're talking about the challenges of cost. So we've got loads of data. We've got loads of data which we can pull out, and there's the four main drivers of engagement. So we think about engagement as that outcome. The people practices. So people who will stay, people who will perform, people who will advocate and shout about your industry and the company they're working for, the farm they're at, the industry they're in, and they're passionate about it is the engagement outcome that we're looking at, people outcome. And we've done within food and food manufacturing, beverage manufacturing, we can see there's four main real inputs for people if you want that positive people outcome. And the first one is people practices. So learning, growing, being recognized for what they do. The next one is line management. Line managers tend to be number one, but in this industry, line management is the second one. So talented line managers who trust people, who coach people, who don't get in the way of them doing a good job. Then it's that well-being stuff, and then it's communication. We see those four things come in time and time again, and we say, actually, whatever you're doing, it's the same as that. Whatever you're doing in the business, you cannot afford to not invest in growing people, the talent they do, and teaching them to do it well. Line managers, well-being, and if I think about manufacturing, food manufacturing, supply chain, you think about the risk that someone could go through that's different to a risk of someone who goes to the office, where you have heavy machinery, where you have, animals that may do unexpected things, and the environment that you're putting people in. We see it within well-being, that well-being is relatively high scoring compared to other industries, but it's high scoring based on how people feel that their safety is being treated, whether they feel that the organization cares enough about their safety. So if they start seeing equipment not being maintained, equipment not being replaced when it should have been replaced, they see that as not just as an overall issue, they see it as a well-being issue. You're putting me at risk. You're putting the food at risk that I'm working with. And, actually you see that as a driver, that mental health piece, the stress that people go through, the line manager's role of getting out of the way of people who can do a great job, and that growing piece. And of people that are coming into the industry, Christine, so when you're talking about apprentices and you're talking about graduates and you're talking about people that are new to the industry, that are coming in, that are being coached through their first steps in the industry, they're getting a flavour of what's going on. What's the biggest reason that somebody would drop out of that? What's the biggest shock when they enter the industry from the outside world coming in, that they go, I didn't expect this? Is there one? And what's I guess the second question is how do you get people working together to say it's safe to raise a concern, it's safe to continuously improve, it's safe to always be advancing and changing and demonstrating what you can do, and also there's a job to be done?
I think I'll just talk about our experience with MDS, where we're recruiting between 25 and 35 trainees every 6 months to work on a 2-year program with us. I have to be honest that I think the majority of people who join MDS have no idea what they want to do, and they probably hadn't heard of MDS until they saw us at a careers fair, or that they somehow or other put something into a search engine like Target Jobs and found us. So when we say we're a 2-year graduate program, we'll give you 4 6-month jobs in 4 different businesses. We will train you and you will get another qualification at the end. And since 1986, we've never had anybody finish our 2-year program and not get a job at the end of it. It's in the food industry, and food manufacturing is the biggest industry in the UK. And there's a huge environmental and sustainability agenda. And there's every job you can think of. We're looking for future leaders. It doesn't matter what degree you've done. We will train you and we will help you and we will turn you into somebody who will be extremely valuable in our industry. You almost think, why wouldn't somebody join that? But it's because they haven't heard of us, and because we don't have a name like PwC that recruits 1,000 graduates every year. But if we can actually get those messages to people, and I was speaking to somebody yesterday who's done a criminology degree, and he was thinking, we were looking for future leaders and we didn't mind what degree he'd done. But actually, how fabulous would it be to have somebody in your business who's done a criminology degree if you had modern slavery issues, or you had, you were worried about what was going on in your supply chain? Food fraud is probably the biggest thing that's going wrong with our industry at the moment, particularly in food service, that you think you're eating one thing and in fact you're eating something else. It's like horse meat. Nobody's dying, nobody's getting poisoned out of it, but they are paying for something where they're getting something vastly inferior.
I have to say, I grew up in Tesco, 17 years in Tesco. It wasn't until I worked for British Sugar I actually started really thinking about where did food come from and where did it go. And probably one of the most enlightening sessions I ever had was with their head of food science, Professor Julian Cooper, who would run a very incredibly engaging session where he would talk about sugar, and he would talk about artificial sweeteners, and he would talk about natural versus chemical. How long does something stay in the system? How long does it stay in your own body for? And how long has that been in existence? So things like that sugar has been in existence for, since the beginning of time, and many of the artificial sweeteners in our food have only existed in the last 40 to 50 years. So actually we haven't been able to go through a full cycle of what does that mean for different generations that have consumed them and all the rest of it. And the thing I always get passionate about with the food industry is the breadth of people that you can meet, from agronomists to producers to operators. The whole range is there, and I've never been in an industry that has that breadth before. So I think it's exciting. I think it's very exciting, but also, it is the largest UK industry, and therefore retention is costing I think it's 170 plus million pounds every year to that industry, because they are losing people, because people are leaving the industry, and the majority of those will be in production, majority of those will be in entry-level roles, and that continual focus on replacing labour, finding labour,
it's exhausting.
it's exhausting, and it takes the focus away. It takes the
Yeah.
focus away
And
from being.
you say, I haven't got time to do employee engagement. I haven't got time to work out what I need to do to make life better for people here because I'm too busy recruiting. It's almost like let's focus on what can I do to make life better for the people that are here, and hopefully I will have less recruitment to do.
I've kind of alluded to the answer already. Like, I think throughout this conversation, the thing that really shines through is like you're a clear believer in people, regardless of the process. So at whatever level of supply chain you work at, it always comes down to the individual who has to do the performance, make that decision, sit on the tractor, whatever it is. It's a human being that's sort of in the driver's seat the whole time. When you think about all the different businesses you come across, and I guess all the people you speak to, if you were going to give a piece of advice to a business in 2023 about how to think about their people at the moment, in particular, obviously in the industry you work in, what would that advice be?
One of the things is to realise how important it is, which is what we've just been talking about. But I strongly believe in one-to-ones and setting people objectives. And it was interesting that the co-op, when, I joined the business when it was losing money and we had to move very fast. And the co-op all the time wanted to sell the land because they could invest it in stores. So it was really, had to get it going really quickly. And we would be setting ourselves objectives. And I just said, if those objectives for the year don't scare you, then they're not hard enough. And typically we'd set ourselves objectives, and at the end of 12 months, we'd look back and think, I really didn't think I would be able to do all of that. And the frequent piece of feedback I got from people was, you make me achieve things that I didn't think I could do. And I think that is really the nugget of it. And it was actually something I had when I was interviewed from university by Mars Confectionery, who I then didn't join. I did 3 years later, but I didn't join them from university. They said to me, let's assume that everybody brings 70% of themselves, of their brain power and their effort and everything else to work on a regular basis. What we're not looking for is an individual that's going to bring 90% on a consistent basis. We're looking for an individual that can take a whole team of people from 70 to 80. That has far more impact from you going to 90 if you can bring a team up to 80. And I think that's something that I've always thought was my role, is how do you get everybody so committed that they're bringing 80% of themselves to work? So, there's all of these people are very capable, people that you maybe think they are just doing that role, and then you discover that they breed whippets and that they've got the champion whippets back at home, and you think, well, all of the brain power they're putting into what they're doing there, I want that at work as well. And I'm actually really very strict with people when they say I am just something. I'm just the PA. I said there's no such thing as just. Every role is important, and every role is here for a reason. And I think that you don't hang up your brains when you hang up your coat when you go to work. We want all of you here to try and get the most out of you. So that's not really a very simple message, but it actually sort of think of how every single one of those people is an asset, and how do you get the most out of that asset?
Do you know what I love about that? And I love when you were talking about a manager who sets those objectives and challenges. So we did a bit of research on retention, what drives retention in an organization, across all organizations. And one of them is about feeling pride. Yeah, feeling proud to work for this organization. And one of the things that fuels pride is, and I'm going to have to refer to this, my manager sets me challenging goals or expectations. It drives pride because that person sits there and says, I can do this. My manager
someone believes that I can do this. I'm not sure I can, but somebody else believes I can.
And it's we deal so much. I get shivers when I talk about this stuff because Rob, my business partner Rob, he's an organizational psychologist, a background in, he's a chartered psychologist, and he'll talk about statistically this is what's driving this, and I believe it. I genuinely believe it because I have lived experience. But when I hear you talking about this, and I hear you talking about that everyone has a role and everyone should be challenged and everyone should strive to kind of improve and bring 80% themselves and stuff, and then you look at that and you go, I've got a statistic which on its own just says it's a statistic, but then you listen to this and you apply the two together and you go, there's a science behind this and there's a lived experience behind this that says when I see this happen, this has been the outcome. People are proud. Forget the retention piece for now. If you've got people in your organization that are proud to work for you, think about what they'll do. Yeah, well, number one, they'll probably stay, but think about what they'll do. Yeah, they'll probably make other people proud as well.
But I think also, against your retention argument, is that I have encouraged people to go and do something else. I actually had a PA who had come to work and wasn't really planning to do anything with her life. And I was saying, I think you could have gone to university. It's not too late. You can sign up. Why don't you go and do something? She did go to university. She is now a lecturer, and she's also a county councillor. Works at county councils. You know, big politician. But she's now a university lecturer, and her expectation was, well, I've come to work for a PA and I'm enjoying being here. And I was just saying, you shouldn't be here. Go away and do something else with your life.
I think that brings us to the end of our conversation. Unless anyone has any final thoughts or anything else you'd like to say today.
Actually, I have got a final thing I was going to say, which it is very much along the same lines, is that I can look back at my career and think, well, you know, I worked for a die casting business that eventually got sold and now makes parts for computers. So, you know, what did I add to that? You know, the adverts and the stuff that I worked on at Mars, they've all been forgotten. The co-op farms that we did a huge amount of work improving has got sold and largely broken up. And you think, crikey, what have I actually achieved with my career? And you realize the biggest impact on my career going back is the impact I've had on individual people. It's not what I drove in the business. It's the people impact, and it's the friends and the people that I mentor, going all the way back along everything that I have done, and people who've mentored me. It's people. That's the only thing that's really relevant in the long run. I sometimes do think I look back on my career as a sequence of failures, but I didn't fail on the people side.
Amazing. What a way to finish off. Christine, thank you so much for talking to us today. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.